All right, welcome to Chapter 2, Leadership Traits and Ethics. So here we're going to talk about common traits in successful leaders. Not their behaviors, but their traits, the things inside them. So what value do traits and personalities have on? Well, we like to understand people's personalities because they do affect their leadership styles. And we can help explain people's leadership styles if we have a better handling on their traits, and we can also somewhat predict job performance. So for the homework, you're going to have to do a Big Five personality model if you haven't done it already. And we're going to look at these different factors. It's not a bad way. It's fairly simple and easy, and it's a short little quiz or survey actually, to figure out some kind of key things about your personality. So in the Big Five personality, the surgency or dominance is your extroversion trait, the people that want to be in charge. And certainly that is part of leadership. Agreeableness, traits agreed with getting along with others, are people sociable and friendly. And I guess it should be said there's a number of studies that point out that where urgency tends to be high in leaders, agreeableness tends to be more in the middle for leaders. You can't be a surly old crank that no one wants to talk to and certainly listen to and be an effective leader unless you have a lot of positional power. But on the other hand, you can't just want to go around agreeing with people and agreeing with everybody says. You're trying to influence, exert influence and make change happen, and sometimes you're going to have to get people moving. So just wanting to get along with people, being everybody's friend, isn't the best formula for being a leader. We'll talk more about that later. Adjustment, leaders tend to be very stable, and particularly in times of change. They have self-control, they're good under pressure, they tend to be secure and positive. Yeah, this is happening, but we'll be all right. Yeah, change is coming. This is an unknown, but we can handle it. We'll be positive about the future. Even when we have trouble, that's okay. We can handle this. This is trouble. We knew this. You got to expect trouble, and we'll be able to fix it. Yeah, don't panic. We got this. We don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out. And also, the leaders tend to be conscientious. Also, many successful people tend to be very conscientious, where people are responsible and dependable. When you give me something, it's complete, it is accurate. Those are two big measures of things. It's on time, it's complete, it's accurate. Actually, that's three measures, I guess, right? And leaders tend to be open, have openness to new experiences. They seek change. They don't just deal with change, they seek change. Hey, here's a new thing. Oh, I was reading this Byte magazine about this new ways to pass information around back and forth. And so, for instance, leaders are really out to make new, right? They're trying to change things. They're trying to influence others to make change. And one of the ways you want to do that is figure out new ways to change things or a new reason to change things. So they're looking for things that can help them in their quest for change. Interesting of why, and we talked about successful people, but the authors of this book pull a little thing in there. Why executives? Now these are executives. Why they're derailed? I mean, their careers are derailed, and sometimes this bullying style. Sometimes you watch TV and the movies, you get the idea that people go around just bullying, their staff all the time and all that. But often this can derail your career. If you're cold and aloof and you're my boss, I might not want to give you thoughts. I don't want to be yelled at. I don't want to be called stupid, so I don't give you ideas that I have, and maybe they're quite good ideas. Or I see you make a mistake and I don't stop you because I'm afraid of getting my head bitten off or shoot the messenger. We don't like people that betrayed personal trust. If you're self-centered, if you're out for yourself and not the group, I'm not too happy about that. Maybe there's certain parts of your job you just don't understand. Those are a problem, and sometimes those can be fixed, but if you don't fix them pretty quickly, those can be a problem. Or you want to do it yourself because you can do it better, and you got to learn how, even though it's going to take somebody else longer, you got to pass it off to them. You have higher level executive type things you should be doing. So I thought that was an interesting list. So traits of effective leaders. So what is it that we find in effective leaders? And we have a pretty good list of things here. And this is a slide you should go back to for your paper about your self-leadership style. Excuse me. So let's look at these one by one. So in terms of the first idea is dominance. We talked about that one in terms of the Big Five personality model. They want to be in charge. And certainly if you don't have some dominance in you, it's difficult for the other traits to matter as a leader. They tend to be high energy. They work hard. They tolerate stress. As a matter of fact, often they feed on it. They're self-confident. I mentioned before, they have the ability to figure out that we're going to solve this thing. We're going to have problems, but we're going to solve it, and we can handle what life, what trying to affect this change is going to throw at it. throw at us. We'll be all right. Locus of control. So people with an external locus of control, the people you've heard like, oh, we've had bad luck, or we're doomed, or they're out to get me, or what are you going to do, right? That's life. What are you going to do, right? So they're very fatalistic and they don't think they can affect things. And they're very worried about life doing things to them and there's nothing they can do about it. Versus people with an internal locus of control, they control their own destiny. They understand, oh, look, even though the company is sort of wobbly from a financial standpoint, I've been keeping my skill level up. I've been doing things like getting an MBA. I've been making sure I volunteer for different jobs at work, so I build my different toolkit of tools up. And so that if the company does get pretty shaky, I have an update resume and skill list where I can go look for a job and I have a better than average chance of finding a new job. And maybe that new job will be better than my current job. And because I've been building up my skills. And so life will get better, not worse, if this thing happens, if the company goes south and so forth. So they really do believe that they can affect how they deal with things. Not so much that you can control what happens to you, because often you can't, but you can certainly control how you respond to that. When I used to coach kids soccer, I had a little tiny girl on the team. She was just small, not very tall, and very thin, and whenever I would bump into her, she'd often fall down. And I said, look, you can't control whether you get knocked down or not, because you're going to get knocked down a lot. What you can control is how fast you get back up. So she kind of made that her thing. When she would get knocked down, she'd pop back up amazingly quickly. And it not only affected her play, but it made her felt better about how things were going on in the field. Stability. Right. Leaders generally exhibit emotional control. They have positive emotions too, not sit around grousing and complaining and we're doomed and all, but that's all right. We'll figure this out. Oh yeah, that thing happened. That's not too good, but it's not that big a deal. We go on. We get paid on Friday. Have no fear. Right. Things will keep moving forward. And it's often this is associated with one of the traits of effective management. They have integrity. They're not just honest and ethical, but they are not just, you can't trust them, but they're trustworthy. And to me, trustworthy means I trust you to make decisions for me in the standpoint of you're not the person, you don't just make decisions that help yourself, but you make decisions for the benefit of the whole group. That's why we get upset when we think our politicians make decisions that just keeps them in power, just gets them elected, and doesn't do the best for their constituents. We get pretty unhappy with them for that because we felt like they're betraying our trust. They're no longer trustworthy. And certainly that's essential in running a successful business because most business is repeat business. So you have to have this integrity to repeat your associations with your repeat customers, with your repeat vendors, with your repeat, finance people, bankers, and those sorts. So it's hard to have an ongoing, long-term successful business without that factor involved. Intelligent. Certainly leaders are smart, although not always the smartest person in the room. And we don't mean just the ability to score high on an IQ test or memorize a bunch of stuff from an exam. We mean the ability to think critically. They can figure stuff out. They can solve problems. And they can make decisions. They don't get locked up on the details. They can figure stuff out. So often people talk about leaders aren't the smartest person in a room. It's like, yeah, it all depends how you measure smarts. They're very good at critical thinking and sorting through things and coming up with the right answer. Emotional intelligence is a different kind of IQ, and we think about in terms of they're self-aware, where they're conscious of their own emotions and how those emotions will affect others around them. And they understand what's going on around them. They don't sit there like a clueless person who's book smart and don't understand what's going on in the room. They get all the undercurrents and the cultural things and all that's happening. So you look at self-awareness. They're not only aware of their own emotions in the first bullet, but they also can control those emotions. So if they're getting mad, they know how to deal with it. If they're getting upset. If they just having a bad day, they understand today's not the day to give somebody a confrontational discussion because my fuse is short and I might go off on them, so I'm going to delay that because I'm just not in the right mood for that today. Maybe somebody needs a good chewing out, and they go ahead and they chew them out, not because the leader feels like chewing them out, but because the person needs it, right? It's like, again, you go back to the parenting role, right? You don't punish your kids because you're mad at them and you feel like getting even. You punish them because they need it, and that's what's good for them in the long run. So they can not only understand their own emotions, they can control their own emotions. and they have this ability to work well with others. It's a group setting, right? It's a group thing that leadership is, right? So I think emotional intelligence is the ability to understand your emotions, the ability to control your own emotions, and the ability to understand others and their emotions. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but you need to understand how they feel about things. Leaders tend to be very flexible. They can adjust to changes. Matter of fact, they seek change, as we said before, right? They like things and they use those changes to help influence others. So they're sort of the change leaders. But they're also sensitive. They're sensitive to group members. They have empathy, like I said, with the emotional intelligence. They don't just bulldoze right through people in their opinions. Often they like to talk to people one-on-one, and we call that individual consideration. Right? I'll hear you. I hear your pain. I feel for you. Right? People like to know that their leader understands their particular challenges. And certainly, leaders have lots of feelings about people that relate to job performance, and in terms of how they feel about people, theory X and theory Y. I don't think this is all that useful of a leadership theory, but I left it in the class because often in the corporate world, you'll hear people refer to he's a theory X leader or he's a theory Y leader. And I'll come with what that is. And the Pygmalion effect is it proposed that leaders' attitudes towards the expectations of their followers that people will live up to the expectations you give them. So if you don't think of so much, you think low-level group, right? Then they're usually pretty happy to live up to that. So in theory X and theory Y, theory X managers think that employees dislike work. Theory Y managers think they like the work. Theory X says you got to be an autocrat and supervise them, very closely and be a dictator. Theory Y says you don't need to. You just give them the task and they're happy to do it. So we see autocratic versus participative management. We're going to use threats and punishments over here. We're going to use internal rewards and motivating factors over here. So, and the real truth is, there's some people in the X category, and in my opinion, there's many more people in the Y category. And there's some mix of those. Again, I think it'd be useful just to be familiar with the terms. The Pygmalion effect I mentioned again is you got to be careful about how you address followers and how you refer to them, because and particularly if you have low expectations, they're usually more than happy to live up to them. So you need to be paying attention to how you're addressing them and see how your behaviors affect how you give away what you think about people and how they'll be perceived. So perception is very important. So if you think you can do a thing or you think you can't do a thing, you're probably right. I mean, I've heard different versions of this from Henry Ford, but that's one of his famous statements, right? Whether you think you can or you think you can, you're probably right, is sort of the shorter version of it. And so you got to be careful about the attitudes you give people. Right, so effective leaders can get ordinary people to do extraordinary things, right? And that's just because they expect it out of them and they give them the tools to make it happen. Self-concept refers to positive or negative attitudes people have about themselves. So self-efficacy is the term teachers use this a lot about whether students think they can be successful in a course. When you think about it, a course is kind of challenging. Here's all this stuff. Here's this whole book of knowledge, or maybe multiple books, and I'm going to learn the important parts of it and be able to learn it well enough to repeat it back and give it back to people and maybe start learning how to use it. That's a pretty big challenge. Or I can start a whole program. I'm going to start a MBA program and be able to finish, even though I don't know anything about accounting or finance or whatever. I don't even know what some of these courses are, but I'll be able to figure it out. I look at the other people in the course, if they can do it, then I can do it, right? That's self-efficacy. Right? And the more you have of that, right, the more you tend to be successful, particularly in avoiding getting negative on yourself and being successful and challenging. Right, so they're both closely related to self-confidence, and they're both necessary to persevere in challenging situations. So how do you develop a more positive attitude? Actually, you can. You can work on your own. When you push out pessimism, when you find yourself sitting around complaining, grousing, maybe there's the coffee bunch at work that like to complain about management or the situation, and they have an external locus of control, right? It's the positive. Basically, my advice is just avoid them. Don't go there, right? They will sort of inflict this poison on you, and it's better off if you're not there while that's going on. As you start to have pessimistic thoughts in your own head, just push them out. I mean, they tend to make you miserable anyway. I was on a trip with a guy one time, and we were gone for, I don't know, 10 days, and we would talk about something going on in the organization, and how it was bad, and we'd find out we turned a really enjoyable time into all of a sudden we were feeling bad about things and getting irritated and aggravated and agitated and whatever other words you want to throw in there. And so we just said, well, let's stop talking about that. Let's talk about all the stuff going on this trip, and then we'd feel a lot better. And then 2 days later, we'd slide back into it, and we're like, oh no, we said we weren't going to do that anymore, and we stopped talking about it. And you can feel a lot better about things. It's going to affect your outlook on everything. So you actually can train your brain to look for more positive things and to push out this pessimistic stuff, and it affects your behavior, and then it affects your attitude and your behavior both. So basically, just stop complaining. I have a no whining sign in my office, right? It doesn't do you any good, right? So, figure out what you can influence and work on those, and the rest, just let it go. Just let it go, right? And again, avoid those negative people because they're trying to infect you with their as one video I heard say, they're trying to infect you with their stinking thinking, right? They're trying to look down on things. This was an old motivational speaker from the 60s and 70s. He referred to that as stinking thinking. People are trying to find fault in everything because they enjoy complaining about how miserable everything is. And that's their way to get attention. All right, so we're going to set and achieve positive goals, and then we're, as you achieve goals, as you achieve things, you're going to feel better and better. And again, we'll talk more in here about how to set good goals. All right, so focus on successes. Don't dwell on failures. Look, not everybody is successful. And in a little bit, in the next video, I'm going to talk about George Washington and what he did to be successful and how he started out his career. He was less than successful to begin his career, and if he was able to recover, you should be able to. And when people do give you rewards, they do give you compliments, accept them, say thanks. Don't just deflect and push them off on the other people. Take them, accept them, and say, yeah, you're welcome. I worked hard on that. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you appreciated my good work. Right? So don't belittle your accomplishments. Right? Take them for what they are. Right? And then don't play the compare game. Everybody, there's not a person out there who wins every category, who wins it, has the most friends, has the most popularity, has the most success, has the most whatever it is they value. And so don't play that compare game. Somebody's going to always beat you in certain categories. Just be happy with what you have, and if you're not, pick a couple things and work on them. Those things are useful. Right? And think about for yourself, what is it you want? Don't let advertisements on TV and other people's version of what's important, right, drive you. Think about yourself and what you value and what you want out of things and out of life. Right? And try to be a positive role model for others. People will see you doing this and they'll start to follow you, as opposed to a negative role model, which is be terrible to be a negative role model. Right? And then sometimes the advice is when things go wrong, help other people who are having even worse off. And I've certainly done that too. And that it makes you feel a little better. If you can't fix the thing that's making you feel bad, go fix something else. Right? And often that's the start. That's the beginning of it. All right, and then later in this course, we're going to talk a lot more about ethics from the other textbook that's on the syllabus, but certainly a couple of things on ethics, and there's a self-assessment on ethics for this chapter I had you do. All right, when we think about right behavior, that's pretty clear, right? It's right behavior and wrong behavior, and what makes that is a lot more complicated, that's for sure. Certainly business ethics are important and has a lot of input into the news these days. Unethical behavior is more likely to be found in certain places, like people that are emotionally unstable, or they have an external locus of control. What could I do? Right? I was in this situation. What could I do? I had to do the unethical thing. I had no other choices. Well, generally, you always have choices. Ethical is part of integrity, right? So people with positive attitudes about ethics, people who think ethics are a good thing, tend to be more ethical. People are like, oh, this is something inflicted on us from the outside because they have external locus of control, tend to be less ethical. Right, so people are more likely to act unethically in highly competitive situations. They would just a little bit of cheat to help them win. Certainly that's true in some situations. If they're unsupervised, there's an old saying that says, ethics are what you do when no one's looking. Right? It's not a bad way to put it. There's some evidence to indicate that companies with formal ethics policies have fewer unethical situations. That's a little iffy. If you look at Enron, right, the big company that's famous for bad ethics and behaviors in the 90s, and they had a beautiful ethics policy. If you go back and read it, it basically apparently when these executives in the company looked at the ethics policy, it said they thought it said thou shalt not, and then had all these ethical policies. But so having a formal ethics policy is no guarantee people will act ethically, but it does kind of show the company cares about ethics. They're at least willing to discuss it, bring it up, and they care enough to have a policy on it. So I guess maybe that's a beginning. Although most people could not tell you the ethics policy of their organization. It's much more important, walk. Do you talk? If you talk the talk, do you walk the walk kind of thing? And when somebody is behaving unethically at work, are they punished, or do they get rewarded for making it happen, even though they had to seriously cut corners or maybe take advantage of others? And how do people justify unethical behavior? Right. Certainly, they talk about higher purpose. So the ends justifies the means, and that's a very common one. I had to do this thing to get this other thing. They blaming unethical behavior on others. Again, external locus of control. I had to do it. They had me backed into a corner. There's nothing I could do. They gave me an order. I had to follow it. Diffusion, right? We're going to make this decision as a group. When the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up at takeoff, we, the group, voted to send it up when it was 32 degrees, even though we knew that it wasn't designed to go up in freezing weather, and that the O-rings on these solid fuel boosters got very stiff at 32 degrees and blower and weren't liable to do their job. And then we ended up blowing up the space shuttle and killing 7 people. Probably no one person in the room would have had the guts to make that decision on their own, because they knew it was extremely questionable and extremely risky with other people's lives. But as a group, they thought it would be okay because they were literally a group of rocket scientists. So how could they be wrong? How could they all be wrong? Turns out they were and died. And often people are behaving unethically. Say, well, okay, I did this, but I'm not the worst one. Other people do way worse, like this and this and this. And they generally have a couple examples that are more than happy to pull out. And that's not much justification by my answer. Sometimes they minimize the harm caused. So I don't know. Maybe it's bullying, and they say, "Look, we were just kidding. That person laughed too." And you may not realize they went home and cried themselves to sleep or something, but they just try to minimize the harm, or they again blaming it on somebody else. It was caused by someone else's behavior, or they use cosmetic words, which is kind of a more sophisticated example. We're going to change the words, so we're not going to fire people and have them lose their job. We're going to right size the organization, which means we're going to downsize, which means we're going to lay people off and they're going to lose their job. So instead of having a layoff, we're going to right size the organization. Now, I'm not saying layoffs are unethical, but often we use cosmetic words to hide stuff. There's a movie about the American troops in Vietnam where the guy says we purposely did things to make it not seem so bad. So, for instance, you didn't burn down someone's home and they had these reed huts that these villagers lived in. We would torch a hooch, right? They nicknamed these homes hooches, is what they called this certain style of hut. And burning a hooch to them was like burning down a shed, because it kind of looked like a shed, when in fact it was somebody's home for a long, long time, maybe multiple generations of a family. And you would torch it, you wouldn't burn it to the ground, and make it seem like sort of just we're gonna make it seem like something it wasn't. And that's not an uncommon thing. We'll take an act and give it different definitions. We don't torture prisoners. We enhanced interrogation, right? So that's a more sophisticated behavior of sort of seeming like our unethical behavior is less so. So simple guide. So some simple things to remember. Golden rule, right? There you go. Right? That's a good place to start. Right? Golden rule's been around a long, long time for a reason. There's this 4-way test, and we think about this when you are particularly in dealing with others, right? Is this thing the truth, right? Is it fair? Is this issue fair for all concerned? Will it better the relationship? Are we all going to come out of this in a positive fashion, right? And is it beneficial to all concerned, right? Those are certainly fair questions to ask about what's going on. And we'll look at more in here, right? And here's a very common one, right? And when it's all said and done, am I proud to tell the relevant stakeholders my decision? And I know when I was a kid and started, had access to a vehicle, I could get out of my parents' sphere of influence and go around in different social situations, parties and things. I remember my dad telling me, like, when you're at a place and you don't feel, you feel embarrassed to come home and tell me either where you were or who was there or what was going on, then you probably shouldn't be there. You probably should get in your car and leave. I thought, that's pretty good advice. And so the same kind of thing. If you're not proud of it, what you've done, and you're not willing to own up to it, then you really got to ask yourself why you're doing this thing. So we should look for a win-win situation for all the parties involved. When I teach negotiations, we talk about that. The art of negotiation is not taking everything you can from the other person, but it's finding a win-win solution that everybody's willing to agree to so everybody comes out of it ahead. It's not your job to make sure the other person comes out of ahead in negotiations, but if you give them something where they think they come out ahead, they perceive that they're better for this decision, then they're much more likely to agree to what you're offering and live up to it. And from that standpoint, you do win by helping them find something that they want. So what does it take to be an ethical leader? Right? It takes courage. You got to be able to stand up to things. Often we draw strength from others, right? If work is your most important thing in your life, then you're really worried about endangering your reputation at work. But if your most important thing in your life, your family, your friends, all of that, then being courageous at work isn't your whole ego is not invested in it, so you're much more liable to stand up against things you think that are wrong. Sometimes there's this fear of failure, but you got to understand we all fail. And sometimes when we interject ourselves early, we can take action before things get too bad. I always thought it was better to think about these situations when the heat's not on, before the situation comes up. What would you do? That's why it's good to talk about this stuff in class. What would you do in this situation, in this situation, in this situation? Think it over when it's calm. Think it over when you're objective, not when you're in the heat of the moment, not when all these outside pressures are on you to do or not do this thing. So I think the more you can think about those ahead of time and say, yes, I would do that, or I won't do that, or yeah, it's probably okay, right? The more you can make those decisions ahead of time when it's calm, then probably the better decisions you'll be making.